The gospel lesson this morning coming from the 20th chapter of Luke, verses 27 through 38. Some Sadducees, those who say there is no resurrection, came to him and asked him a question. Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, leaving a wife but no children, the man shall marry the widow and raise up children for his brother. Now, there were 7 brothers. The first married and died childless. Then the second and the third married her. And so, in the same way, all 7 died childless. Finally, the woman also died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had married her. Jesus said to them, those who belong to this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy of a place in that age and in the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. Indeed, they cannot die anymore because they are like angels and are children of God, being children of the resurrection. And the fact that the dead are raised, Moses himself showed in the story about the bush, where he speaks of the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now he is God, not of the dead, but of the living, for to him all of them are alive. Praise God for the hearing of these sacred words. You may be seated.
Who is someone that's reminded you, taught you about the presence and the love of God? What was it about them that taught you? What was it about them that reminded you of the presence, of the love of God? Were they humble, kind, generous, gentle, loyal, fierce? Who is someone that has reminded you and taught you about the life-giving presence and the love of God? Today is All Saints Sunday. It's the day that we pause and we remember and we think about all of those who have come before us, whose lives have taught us what it looks like to live the faithful life. It's also a day, though, that we're reminded of our own calling, our own vocation to live our lives in such a way that we might be a reminder of God's presence and love in this world. Our lesson, the one you just heard moments ago, I believe has a lot to teach us about what it means and looks like to live a faithful life. Our lesson, it's a unique one. It's unique for 2 reasons, really. The first is it's the only time in the Gospel of Luke that we hear about a group of folks known as the Sadducees. At the same time, it's unique because it's really the only moment that we have where Jesus gets specific and talks through some details about the resurrection. In the moments leading up to the lesson, Jesus has been fielding questions about his authority. He's been fielding questions from lawyers and priests, and now it pivots in our lesson to a group of people called the Sadducees. Who are they? Well, they're wealthy, elite. They're friendly with the Romans, and as a result of that relationship, they benefit economically from that situation. And they're very, very serious about how they interpret the Bible. In fact, for the Sadducees, it's only the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, the law of Moses, that they consider authoritative when it comes to the matters of God. And because in their mind, in those first 5 books of the Bible, there's no mention of the resurrection, they don't believe in the resurrection. And in fact, they make fun of people who do believe in the resurrection. That's what they're doing in our lesson today when they pose that question. You can almost feel their sarcasm oozing out as they ask Jesus that question about the woman who was married and then widowed and then remarried 7 times. Whose wife will she be in the resurrection? We wouldn't fault Jesus if he dismissed their question altogether, would we? We wouldn't fault Jesus if he says to the Sadducees, I'm on to you and I'm on to your shenanigans. I'm not going to put up with it. But Jesus doesn't do anything like that at all. Instead, he honors them. He does what Jesus does. He respects them. He answers their question, and he assumes that they asked the question because they wanted to learn. And we're blessed today because Jesus fielded their question about the resurrection. Because let's be honest, the afterlife is important. You know this. I know this. The afterlife, it is important because if you've ever lost someone, you know what that's like. It could be a child. It could be a spouse. It could be a grandchild. It could be a friend. You know what it's like to love, and in one moment you love that person, and the next moment they are gone, and all you have left now is that love, but has no place to land. And the experience of a love that has no place to land, well, that's grief. The afterlife, it's important because if you've ever been in that situation, and if you haven't been in that situation, let me just let you in on it, you're going to be in that situation, and you're going to find the question of the afterlife becomes very, very important. I find it interesting and significant that of the folks that have gone through a near-death experience, about 40% of them report a similar pattern. Traveling through a tunnel, a burst of light at the end, a sense of being in a loving reality, and an awareness that they're outside of their body. I find the last detail the most interesting, at least to me, an awareness that they're outside of their body. Even some of them are able to report details that there's no way that they would have known if they were in their body. Which is significant because if that's true, then the modern assumption that awareness is connected to our brains is called into question, and the sky's the limit about the possibilities. I find it interesting. I find it significant. But even more than that, I find it interesting and I find it significant that Jesus, he believed in the afterlife. The Sadducees, they come to Jesus and they say, suppose there's a woman who is married and widowed and remarried 7 times. Whose spouse will she be in the resurrection? And Jesus responds, she won't be property. That might have caught you off guard. But underneath the Sadducees' question is an assumption. It was a very popular assumption, a big assumption in Jesus' day. Women were property. People didn't get married because of love. They got married so that they could procreate. And a woman, well, she got her rights through her husband, and a woman's place in Jesus' world, her role was to have babies and procreate so that the male's line could continue on. And in Jesus' mind, though, that's not how it works. Oh, he says to the Sadducees, you're asking the wrong question. You see, because in the resurrection in heaven we're going to be like angels. Angels. And in heaven, in the resurrection, we're going to be equal. Which all the more begs the question then, why don't we as Christians live like it? I mean, if this is where we're going to be equaled. Why don't we live like it? Even more than Jesus' answer, the thing I find most significant about this passage, the thing I love the most about this passage, is the way he goes about fielding the question. He meets the Sadducees where they are at. He uses their language to engage them. Oh, Jesus says, you don't believe in the resurrection? Then what about Moses? You see, because the Sadducees only use the law of Moses, then what about Moses, Jesus says? When he met God in the burning bush, God said, I am the God of Abraham, I am the God of Jacob, and I am the God of Isaac. To God, Jesus goes on to explain, they are all alive. To God, they're resurrected. At which point the Sadducees undoubtedly would have said, you've got it all wrong, Jesus. You interpret it wrong, Jesus. You don't understand, Jesus. And yet, even then, in the midst of their arguments, underneath the surface, there would be a lingering question. What if Jesus was right? And I think there's something in that for us today. In a world that doesn't altogether agree with what we believe as Christians, 66% of our neighborhood, did you know this? 66% of our neighborhood doesn't even go to a community of faith. Our neighborhood, this one. That's up from 58% 10 years ago. Of those 66% that are not a part of the community of faith, one of the reasons they say that they quit going to church is because 25% don't even believe in God anymore. I don't have to quote these stats to you. You know this struggle. If you're a grandparent, you're probably worried and thinking about, why is it my kids and my grandkids don't care about church? If you're a parent, you're thinking, how do I pass my faith along to my kids? And then maybe even underneath the surface, you're thinking, what is it that I believe anyway? Maybe you don't have kids yet. Even then, you're thinking, how is it that I share my faith in a non-confrontational and healthy way? And in this lesson, we find a playbook, an approach, a way. Here's the playbook. We honor the people who have questions. We respect them, even if their question is sarcastic and disrespectful. That's the Jesus way. And then when we ask a question, the second thing the lesson teaches us to do is to answer the question honestly, to tell people what we believe. As a pastor these last few years, I've fielded a lot of hard questions. And each one of these questions I've fielded have been a gift. They've chipped away at many ideas and things that I've been taught to think. And now finally I've come to a place where if someone asks me, what is it you believe? I would respond in a very simple phrase. I see Christ in you. Underneath the surface of all the divisions, all the arguments, all the elections, all the fighting, underneath the surface of all that stuff that we're so entangled with, there's the presence of Christ, the life-giving love of God. And each and every one of us has that spark within us. Each and every one of us have sacred value. And each and every one of us, even though we might not see it, even though we might not believe it, each and every one of it, it's there. It's there. And this is the mission of the church, and this is the mission of the faith, to proclaim a message and a story that's bigger than all these tribes our world has created. I find that when I choose to see Christ in others and in myself, I'm planting good seeds. And all I have to do is be patient. Let them grow. You see, that's what Jesus does, right? He poses an answer. He doesn't argue about it. He doesn't force it. He just poses his answer. He's patient to let it grow. Why? Because we have all eternity to wait. This is about a month ago. I was at the soccer field just around the corner at Van Park, watching my 5-year-old Ella play soccer. It's quite endearing to watch 5- and 6-year-olds play soccer. It's the mob method. They just all follow the ball. And as I was sitting there watching Ella, next to me was a set of grandparents. They had driven all the way from Minnesota to watch their granddaughter play soccer. It was the first time they traveled since the pandemic began. So they were really excited to be there. As we were chit-chatting, though, inevitably the question came, what do you do? Well, I'm a pastor. Oh, you're a pastor, huh? Yep. Where are you a pastor at? Oh, just around the corner. A place called Methodist Temple. Methodist. Methodists are good. Oh, good. Then came the next question. How many converts do you get? Ooh, that's an odd question. Haven't been asked that question in years. But before I can answer, the lady says, you see, because we're Jewish, and our rabbi, he gets a lot of converts. I said, well, that's good. We at Methodist Temple, we're really blessed. As I walked away from that conversation, I knew she meant nothing by the question. I knew it. But it lingered. Should I? Should I be about converts? Should we? Should we be about converts? Is that our mission, to convert? Is that our mission, to force people into our box? Is that what we should do? Make them believe what we believe? Finally, I decided, nope. Not my thing. Instead, what's inspiring to me is, I just follow Jesus. I respect people and their questions. I answer them honestly, and I allow them, those seeds, to grow. Today's All Saints Sunday. It's the day that we stop and we remember all those that have come before us who have planted seeds in our lives that continue to grow. It's a day in which we commit ourselves to following faithfully too in the seed planting business. On this day, let us give thanks to God for all those that have come before us. Let us commit ourselves to walking faithfully too. It's in this spirit now I invite us to join together in Holy Communion.